This week on the Eldritch Lorecast, the Sunken Isles Kickstarter is now live, and we're talking all about it with Logan Reese, plus our weekly check-in with the Legends of Vox Machina, all that and more right now. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Eldritch Lorecast. My name is Ben Byrne, and we are back, your favourite Dungeons & Dragons podcast here with Dael Kingsmill, James Hake, and sitting in for Sean Merwin this week, Logan Reese, you hath returned.
I feel like we need to... because people are busy.
No, you're back because we're celebrating. We're celebrating the launch of your Kickstarter, Sunken Isles, which has literally just went live.
You're back because you've been busy.
Exactly.
I have been very busy.
Exactly.
And now I'm here. Hello.
Before jumping into that, I have to ask you a question because I start every episode with a non-specific question related to nothing whatsoever. Last week we were talking about animated series, like fantasy animated series, your Castlevanias, your not Avatar The Last Airbenders, which was a huge oversight on our behalf. What is your favorite live action fantasy series in the history of the world? And
by series, do you mean like just TV shows?
Well, it could be like a web series, I suppose. It could be if it's the Lord of the Rings movies, I suppose I would count that as a series.
That's tough.
But not as an animated
There's a lot to
series.
choose from. I mean, maybe timely, appropriate. I think Critical Role Campaign 1 stands pretty tall, even though it's some 400 hours long.
Yeah, I looked up fantasy and I got Ghostbusters, so I'm not sure I'm gonna.
That's kind of fantasy.
Here to reference.
That's kind of fantasy.
Shoot.
I don't know. I just feel like there's like this growing trend. You know, everybody's chasing Game of Thrones success, right? But I think that that's a positive thing for people who are in the tabletop role playing space. If fantasy is your jive, because. You know, I've been getting into watching like really trashy fantasy movies and TV shows, stuff that like reviewed really poorly with critics because the storyline wasn't great or the characters weren't great or whatever. But sometimes you just get like amazing visuals, right? Like I'm not a 8th season of Game of Thrones apologist per se. I'm not going to like defend the storyline or anything. But when Drogon goes ham on King's Landing, like visually, it's just stunning, right? Like it gives you such a visceral image of what a dragon attack on a city would actually look like.
I'm the person who's only... I watched the first episode of Game of Thrones, and then I watched the last episode of Game of Thrones because I happened to be in LA during a watch party, and I was like, I guess I'm doing this. So that's my Game of Thrones experience. So I don't really know what you just said, but I'm glad that you're happy.
That's fair. Thank you. I'm glad that you're glad that I'm happy. Do you have like a fantasy series, Dael, that you would insert instead?
I don't know that I, off the top of my head, can pick what my answer is for like all time in the history of the world. But I really enjoyed Shadow and Bone, which came out not that long ago. I'm really looking forward to more of that. I don't know. It really gripped me. Really good mood, really good characters. I don't know. I think it's really interesting and an interesting adaptation as well, by all accounts from my friends who loved the books. So yeah, really enjoyed that. Really looking forward to more.
James, do you have is Critical Role what you're going with, or do you have another answer?
Yeah, I want to add another one. This is definitely a little bit more on the historical side of the spectrum, but I think that Black Sails qualifies as very good piratical fantasy. I've definitely been immersed in that lately. I think the first 3 episodes are a bit rough. I think the sort of obsession with Game of Thrones was at its height then, and some of its more gratuitous elements are present really strongly in its sort of 3-episode pilot, but damn, it really takes off after that.
Sure.
Once they set
Can I
the
say, Black Sails, Toby Schmitz, all right, as an actor, I'm such a nerd. After I won a drama award in my last year of high school, I went to see Toby Schmitz perform in a production of Private Lives, and the tickets were like special, like there's a Q&A with the actors afterwards, and so we got to hang around afterwards while we did this Q&A, and I proper swooned. There was this moment where he was talking about his approach to theatre and how he likes to really break the fourth wall, and he was saying, you know, someone's going to the bathroom, you give them a wave, there's some cute girls up there, give them a wink, and he pointed at me and my friend, and we were like, ah! So that's what I think of every time
What actor is that? Is he the one who plays Flint, the redhead?
I actually haven't seen. I have to look it up. Toby Schmitz.
Well, the actor who played Captain Flint, I've been on a James Bond marathon lately, watching all the movies after I saw No Time to Die, and he is the villain. Spoiler alert! In Die Another Day. And actually, I think one of my favorite fantasy scenes of all time is in that show. There is a sword duel between Pierce Brosnan and whoever that actor is, and this is the best sword fight I've ever seen on cinema. It's incredible. They're tearing through this British palace, switching from rapiers to like broadswords, and just going ham on each other. It's so good. Die Another Day, not a good movie. That scene, really good.
Apparently, he plays Rackham. I gotta watch the show.
I should.
Rackham. That's a good character.
I should check out Black Sails and also Shadow and Bone. Those are both two that have sat on my list for a while. And also talking of historical kind of fantasy shows, The Last Kingdom comes to mind, and also Vikings. I think if you watch Vikings up to like the end of season 2 or season 3, I can't quite remember, and then start The Last Kingdom, they actually kind of sequelize each other in a really cool way. The thing I love about both of those shows, The Last Kingdom more so because Vikings starts to make it a bit more overt, but is this idea of like, does magic exist in the context of this show? Or is it just them interpreting signs and believing that it's magic? You know, the classic being like after somebody dies, there's a rainbow and they think that it's the bridge to Valhalla. And it's like, is that coincidence that they see a rainbow? Or is somebody actually crossing over in the context of the show?
Is there magic really or is there not?
Yeah, for sure. Logan, did you come up with an answer now that I've given you a bit of time to think?
I do have an answer, yeah. I had it, and then I had to hang on to it. That reminds me, though, in Vikings, the main villain for Sunken Isles was unintentionally inspired by one of the major antagonists in the show. Like, I put them together, and then the writer that kind of took charge with them was like, oh, this is like that guy. I was like, yeah, you're right. But I actually have a really old trio of movies that I feel like they're spiritually related. So my favorite live action fantasy, because normally I like a lot of animation, would be The Labyrinth, The Dark Crystal, and The Neverending Story.
Okay, yeah.
I think those are probably my favorites.
The Jim Henson trilogy.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Were you a fan of, what was that show that came out on Netflix that was kind of, it was The Dark Crystal. That's what I'm thinking of. They did like a TV series.
Yeah, they have a new TV series. I have not checked it out yet.
Tragically canceled after a single season. We were robbed of it.
The last episode of that series was just like, kapow! You wanted good fantasy, here it is!
And then never again. Shoot.
I'm eternally salty over Dark Crystal Age of Resistance being canceled. We were robbed.
Yeah, I'll have to watch that and get upset.
That's the streaming, what do they call it? The streaming model for you, right? Like, it's almost more cutthroat than traditional TV piloting, where it's just like, let's see how it goes. If it doesn't take off instantly, it's dead in the water.
More likely to get greenlit, more likely to get cancelled.
Yeah, exactly.
Ironically, you get a more diverse set of bad and good ideas, and they all just die in the rising water.
Well,
that poor show, it's the new Firefly to me. It's the new cancel after one season.
Now I can't watch it.
Well, it got a movie as well. I mean, it's a couple of decades old now, but, you know, go watch that. And it literally finishes off the story. Speaking of dead in the water, that is what the players' enemies are going to be in Sunken Isles. The new adventure written by Logan Reese in partnership with Ghostfire Gaming.
Who's that?
Our Kickstarter has just gone live as of like 2 days ago from when this episode goes live. Logan, how are you feeling right now? I mean, this is your third Kickstarter. What's your general feeling immediately after a Kickstarter launches?
My nerves are on fire, and I don't think the feeling ever changes. First book, second book, third book, it's always that launch day. This is the first one that I've actually been late to. The other two, I was there for the launch. This one, I thought it was going to be tomorrow. Whoops. So I wake up and it's like, yeah, they hit their goal in 35 minutes. I was like, huh? That was my REM sleep period. What happened? Yeah, but no, it's exciting. It's a good time. It's ironic that you say dead in the water, because that's probably one of the last places you want to leave your enemies' bodies, in the Sunken Isles.
Why is that?
There are collectors. One of the major enemy factions actually goes around, collects flesh and fallen corpses, and brings them to this factory of enemies So the more time that passes, the more people that you fight, the more enemies you get to fight later.
Right. Okay. That's pretty terrifying. I have to ask you. Yeah, I would be remiss if I didn't. In the Ghostfire Gaming or the Grim Hollow Discord server, the Shrimp Lord, which my understanding is one of the like monsters within the within the book, has become a bit of a meme. Everybody's in love with the Shrimp Lord. We literally got asked today, can we do like a stretch goal where we get a special edition Shrimp Lord cover? Can you reveal more to me about what the Shrimp Lord is? Because I don't think we really realized, if you're not familiar with the story of it, that the Shrimp Lord was more than just like a sort of mood piece, art piece for it. Because it's this beautiful image of all these flamingos, but out of context, you're like, what's with the flamingos? Shrimp Lord.
Why is there one 8-foot tall flamingo standing among them? Yeah, I actually don't remember how big they are. I think they are huge. These are Flamingo Shrimp Lords is the full name. So just so you get the idea of what you're facing off against. They appear pretty early and then pretty late in the story. So they're at a couple of specific locations that kind of ties into the lore. Not necessarily why they're there, but the people that liked flamingos kind of brought them to these islands, and then they started to evolve because the islands are inherently magic. So you sort of get like this monarch, this singular, like enormous flamingo that watches over the entire flock. And they are challenge rating 7 compared to, I think, the CR 1/8 other flamingos. So it is a massive surprise to like go around flamingos in these wading pools and then just to look up and see death.
Can a druid transform into such a flamingo?
They are beasts. I think druids can only go up to CR 5.
Not if you're a Circle of the Moon.
Then you're a moon shrimp lord. Yes, they are just beasts. So I guess
that's what we needed. We need druids to have more dangerous things to turn into.
I think we have a decent amount of beasts. There's a lot of stat blocks in this book compared to the first book that we did. It's really funny, but I think that's on the agenda to get to. So we'll talk about that in a minute.
What are some of your other favorite stat blocks that are in there?
Oh, that's tough. Man, I wish I had it open.
That's the thing. Whenever I get asked a question like that, it's like, list your favorite whatevers. It's you're like, oh, my mind is blank.
We brought a bunch of new undead to kind of fill in like the challenge rating, maybe 2 up to 5 gap that we have with traditional undead in 5e. There aren't a lot that can go up against like slightly tougher parties, and then there aren't singles that can face off against them. So we have some more sentient undead. We have a set of pirate themed ones, a set of these ancient islanders. And then we have, I guess I could say that my favorite set of monsters are these alien things that collect flesh and bring them back and repurpose them into this singularity, which is what they want the islands to become. Right. But one of the most terrifying parts about them is that they are, in fact, celestials. They look like aberrations, but they are not.
I enjoy kind of like flipping expectations on players, especially paladins and clerics that are like, I turn undead, and I'm like, this thing doesn't run away. It's not an undead creature, or it's not a aberration, or whatever it happens to be.
Like, I try to banish it. No, this is its home. This is where it's from, right here. They're like, whoa, wait a minute.
The cinematic trailer dropped as well. It's been posted a couple different places. You can check it out on the Kickstarter page. It's there. This thing, it's a real mood piece. It's like a musical song that kind of lays out the story. It was composed by John Theodore, and it's kind of similar, I guess, in format to what you did for Seeker's Guide to Twisted Taverns as well, where that was a really catchy song. Is this like his music like central to when you're writing? Was this important to you to have something really musical like that?
I mean, naturally, music is a catchy part of a project, so you want it to be something that people kind of enjoy on their own, even if they're not enjoying the project. So you kind of want that to be the forefront. But more so with this one, like the Seeker's Guide, I was thinking, okay, I wanted to do an animation, but because the main character that we built sort of became this really exuberant, really present personality bard, I was like, well, we have to do a song for it. And for this one, early in the production, I think the elevator pitch was, what if we threw like Lovecraftian themes on top of Norse themes on top of Hawaiian themes and just mashed it all together? So my immediate thought was, well, we have to do a sea shanty. Like, we absolutely have to put together something that kind of goes with the theme of sea shanties, where it's very heave-ho, it's very brutish. So we have all these undead that are returning to the islands now to reclaim the home that they messed with and kind of ruined. So it's if an older culture had collapsed and then a new, a much younger one, so a much more communal one, was built on top of it. And then right when we're at the tipping point where, oh, hey, they're about to enter like a capitalist stage, the old one comes back. So it's all these people who kind of tried to destroy the islands and are now these undead people trying to take them back. So what would they sing?
Yeah, sure. It's got a lot of tech, like it feels like a sea shanty, not just in, you know, tempo and style, but there's Anna Pantsu, there's Cammy Cat, there's Jason, there's 3 vocalists kind of contributing to it, which gives it this, when you're listening to it, this really textured, like communal, people in a tavern kind of, or on a boat or whatever, you know, all singing this together. It's really cool. Also the artwork, is that kind of what you had in mind when you were writing it, the stuff that's been coming out?
It was a pretty fast-paced project at certain points, so there were some minor miscommunications. I think definitely the opening shot, one of the major ones, is this paint sort of pours down from the sky and manifests this sailing ship, when in reality the ship is supposed to have already been present in the waters, and these islands are literally cast down into this setting. Like, they are created from this deity that is painting it to life. So it's kind of a miscommunication there, but I think visually it's about as colorful as I wanted. I think all of the art for like the races and a lot of the locations is really, really interesting, and it pops visually. But, you know, we went a little fast.
Yeah. No, it's
well, sometimes you got to do that. The deadlines for projects like these are relentless.
Yeah, no, the artwork's beautiful. I love the amount of color in it. And there's something, I was describing this to someone in the office, and it's like super niche, and it's not what the artwork is of, but that's kind of like the large skies, the colorful skies, the sunsets, the ocean that are in the artwork. It reminds me, and this is nothing at all to do with the ocean or sunsets, but basically being in Australia on like in a country town on a late afternoon, like 4 or 5 o'clock when the sun's going down, and you can hear like the parrots and galahs out on the football oval, which is like a really...
Yes, you're just describing my childhood.
Yeah,
my
right?
heart.
Like, and I don't know why, because none of the portraits are like of that specifically, but I think it was just like the sunsets and the colors, and there was just... I want to use the word dreamy, but it wasn't really like a dream looking at the artwork for Sunken Isles. It's almost more, you know, there's something nostalgic about it, even though I don't personally have nostalgia for you know, pirate ships or anything.
Yeah, it's true. A big part of it is definitely just the way that the colors kind of are laid onto each of these canvases. Because it really feels... I saw a video where someone like pumped up the saturation for a video of like just in a hot tub, and it's so much more vibrant and blue. And it's like, that's what it used to look like when I was younger, when my eyes could absorb more colors from my surroundings. So I think that's kind of what the theme feels like it's going for, definitely. And there's, if you've ever seen Midsummer, it's just, there's only 2 theme points I want to pull from that, is that it's supposed to be like this, well, I guess the intention is this nightmare scenario in a beautiful, like, festival setting. It's this gorgeous location that you want to go and visit, but the things that are happening there make it bloody and deadly. And that's really kind of the clash that is happening in Sunken Isles as the story goes on.
What were some of your other main inspirations for this project, this setting, this story?
I don't know. There's another setting that I want to do after this one that hopefully will be just as interesting, but I really like pulling these cultures that have never interacted in history and thinking like, what if they did? And what if we threw in some fantasy elements? Some like, what if their mythology clashed against each other? How would they meld in a sort of functioning system? So I think a big part of it was just reading through kind of a general Polynesian myths and the way that Hawaiian spirituality works. It's a really interesting, really beautiful way to look at the world that us, like in Western America, have no idea. We've never been introduced to any of these themes. So pulling from that alone is a really exciting kind of journey. And then Norse mythology is very interesting and very wacky and very gruesome. So just throwing them together in, like, what if instead of having another grim dark setting, we had something that was tropical and peaceful, like a vacation that goes wrong. It's the beach episode of D&D.
What sort of Polynesian myth really inspired you?
I really like just the fact that everything is alive in a way. You could relate it to animism, how everything has sort of a spirit and everything works together as sort of this huge family. You have these clashing bodies or spirits that have, I guess what translates to English as body forms, where one of the major antagonists, and not necessarily an antagonist, more an anti-hero in the story, is actually the body form. So it manifests as what looks like a person, the body form of the volcano of the central island that also acts as the island itself. So this character is immortal. Like, they can't die unless the entire island is destroyed. So as long as that part of them persists, they can continue to manifest themselves and affect the story. So I think just the whole sort of a cornerstone of the Hawaiian mythology is very interesting to me.
Because we worked with a cultural consultant on making sure the finer details of all this was, accurate to your vision, but also to the Polynesian culture.
Yeah,
was there anything...
we definitely didn't want to be directly representing them. We wanted to be heavily inspired by these themes and make sure that we didn't misrepresent the themes in the story we wanted to tell. Yeah, it was very collaborative, but we were absolutely blessed with people we got to work with.
Yeah, absolutely. See, I want to ask spoilery questions, because I was about to say, like, is there anything you're particularly looking forward to that'll catch people by surprise? But then it will, by nature, not catch people by surprise.
If I can jump in, Ben, sorry, I feel like I'm kind of snatching the host's mic from you, but I'm just so curious about this project.
Go ahead.
I've been so sequestered in Fables land that I have not had the barest instant to like peer over the cubicle and see what's going on over in Sunken Isles territory. Who did you work with? What cool people did you grab for this?
Well, the major team that we got to work with was Honua Consulting, who we worked with, I guess one of their most prominent figures. I don't actually know how big the group is, but Trisha, was it Takanawa? I could get that wrong. Apologies if I did. But Trisha, we had a few calls sitting in with her just to go over kind of the major direction of the story. We got to sit down and be like, okay, we want to use these words, but English and Hawaiian words aren't even on the same, aren't even on like the same mental wavelength. Like they don't translate this into a sentence structure. Like words have a bunch of different meanings that overlap when you say them depending on the context. And it was really cool to see her kind of try and explain a lot of the themes that we wanted to explore. And then, of course, the Purple Maya Foundation, which is the community the community service group, the nonprofit group that we are donating to throughout the project. I'm actually really, really mad that I didn't get to sit in for the 2 calls that we scheduled for them, just because everything was really hectic. So I didn't know when it was happening. And then when it did, it was an hour ago. So, but I'm really excited that they're a part of the project. Everyone that the team has spoken to seems really, really cool.
Cool. Very cool.
Yeah, it's exciting. Kickstarter's live now. We've also got the stretch goals happening. More magic items, I think, is the first stretch goal. Character sheet specific for the Sunken Isles for the second one. I don't know how many more have been revealed because I haven't looked at the Kickstarter page at this very second. So there might have been some more that were revealed going on. But just very quickly, you mentioned...
we're all looking that up.
You mentioned Purple Maya, Logan, and for each stretch goal, a donation goes to Purple Maya, which is cool. That's exciting for us, and kind of a thank you for helping consult on the project.
It's a culture we want to support because it's obviously had some really negative external impacts, so we want to kind of give them what they deserve. Yeah, the next stretch goal that has been revealed is the hub of the adventure, the main kind of settlement.
Markov. Can you explain, because I was seeing that on the stretch goals, is that like a physical stretch goal? Is that part of the book that gets added?
No, it's a part of the book. It is a normal location that is just kind of a place that the party can visit. It's one of the main areas that they protect, and it is where the first kickoff to the adventure happens, where there is this communal kind of spring festival that everyone across all the isles, just everyone on the surface islands kind of
You mentioned
convenes.
Midsummer, and now I'm afraid of the Spring Festival.
The Spring Festival's fine. It's actually a really interesting little event that happens.
It's the Winter Festival you got to watch out for.
Yeah, right. Or the Fall Festival. Oh.
Ooh.
No, but the history to it is, you have Manaki, which is the name of the Isles, and then you have the Icolf people, who are the dwarven settlers that came in and started chopping down trees, going haywire. But once all was said and done, the two cultures were left to kind of shake hands and build from the ashes. And their first location was this cultural merger called Makolf, which the islanders are a more nomadic group of people. They like to sail and they like to wander across the islands freely because they know it provides for them. But the Icolf people, who come from a wintry wonderland, they need to settle. They need to chop down trees, build houses, and prepare. So you have kind of this merging of one group and their practices and the other group and their practices. And with the stretch goal, what we're going to be doing is sort of really fleshing out that location. We're going to be adding a bunch of side quests to it. It's going to be somewhere that the party can go back to and fight, kind of like Halo Firefight. You just sit there and wait for waves of either undead or these celestials to show up and fend them off and keep that population from dwindling in the future weeks.
The characters in this adventure, do you play as can you align yourself with different factions in all of this? Who are you in this adventure?
You can be anyone. We have new races and we have new backgrounds that kind of help line you up with the cultures that are present. So there are just the way that it is. It's a very comfortable kind of, we're over here doing our own thing, you're over there doing your own thing. So there are these very uniquely developed cultures and races on the Isles. We have the Decapodians, who are like lobster people or pistol shrimp people that stay in their own kind of half-submerged rock. And you can play them, and we have backgrounds tied to kind of where they come from, what goes on over there. We have this underwater race of people. We have the Meyer scales, which are like little dinosaur people that run around in the mud and make moonshine. And then we have the main culture on the island that is the Makolf people, or the Manaki natives, and you have the Icolf settlers, and then you have, of course, the half-breeds, the people that are kind of mixed from both cultures. And we have a few backgrounds for, like, what you might be doing here if you're a native, what you're capable of, how you're able to communicate with the magic in the area. And then we have other backgrounds, like a retired adventurer or a retired merchant that's come here because it's a vacation spot that was newly discovered. Then we have like stranded, not stowaways, but like shipwreck survivors. That's a whole background that you can have, because as the adventure kicks off, suddenly all ships are just starting to get destroyed by like 3 different forces. So you could be someone from a recently destroyed ship, and because the adventure is a bit of a bone grinder, there's a chance that you have to introduce a new character in the middle of week 10 where you're supposed to be level 10. So we have to explain, like, oh, how did you get to level 10 and get found here? So it's all tied into everyone in the Isles is doing their own part. So everyone is kind of leveling up on their own. There are other adventuring parties that you don't hear about that get sent out. So when you have a new player come, they're like, yeah, I just survived the shipwreck from another group and they didn't survive. Can I join yours? So it's a big runaround. But yeah, you can definitely come from the Isles, or you can come from a different setting with a pre-existing character if you wanted to.
It's a really deadly adventure then.
I'm really hoping so. It's the first full adventure supplement that I wrote, so the balance is hopefully a little tipped, and we have a lot of direction for the GMs to kind of add to the difficulty if their party just somehow ends up smashing it, because there's a lot of NPC allies that they can get. There's a lot of people they can add to their ship. Yeah. So it's a very fluctuating adventure, so and we want it to be deadlier.
We wish DMs many dead players. Well, characters.
Well, look, actually, good luck, because as you said, the adventure goes from levels 1 to 20 over 20 in-game weeks, which by design, they should get up into those upper tiers that are very frequently not played. So
very quickly.
I would imagine that the player death is probably going to drop off around levels 10 and 11 based on personal experience. But I wish many a deadly DM luck in knocking off those players consistently.
When I first designed the baseline for the setting, I did a playthrough of level 1 to 20 with some people from my Patreon way back when. And we actually had in the Discord chat a graveyard for players where you would write like their little bio and how they died.
It's like
that's fantastic.
It's like playing XCOM or Pokemon Nuzlocke.
Yeah, or Rogue Legacy.
Yeah.
How did you find the process of designing for high levels? It ain't easy.
Yeah, well, it actually kind of worked out pretty well for us because we have all these really big scale villains that we know you're going to face off in later levels. So like level 10 or level 17, we need to have more challenges. So a lot of the environment starts to build up. Magic starts going haywire. So we have another additional mechanic where every time you cast a spell, something can happen instead of just wild magic. So there's a lot of chaos that the DM can throw at you. And then we have, especially at the very end, just swarms, just masses of enemies that no level 20 party of 5 would be able to reasonably beat, no matter how crazy they are, because it's like an orc horde. You can stand your ground and it becomes a war of attrition. So the difficulty definitely shifts from just throwing fists with people to, oh, we have to stop this event from happening and stop this person.
Kickstarter has launched. You can check out, there will be a link to it in the show notes, but it's called Sunken Isles, and go check it out because it sounds super cool, and I know for a fact it is cool. I actually have, very quickly, one of the things that you can pledge for is this like dice scroll. This is kind of a prototype, so it's not 100%, but it's pretty close to the last kind of thing. And it scrolls out. I do know it's a little more orange on camera, I think, than it should. Sorry, this is great for all people listening to this on audio. Go to Spotify or YouTube if you want to quickly look this up.
It's extremely orange.
It's nice and leather.
Many orange.
It's the camera. It's not quite. It is orange, but it's more like a leathery brown orange than like a bright, vibrant orange in person.
Right.
But then the best bit is inside this zip. Is the Infinity Stones, or dice, as they're also known, which also come with the scroll, and these are the special edition dice. Extremely sharp. Extremely sharp. I think one of our staff members literally pricked themselves on the D4.
Throw them at a dartboard, half of them will still.
If you don't want to step on a D4,
military grade dice.
That's the one.
What's the point of a D4 if you don't need a tetanus shot after stepping on it?
Exactly. So go check it out. Speaking of sailing ships, because that's what we were talking about. Last week we talked a lot about animated series and their influence on our D&D games, how we structure stories, what we like to include, what we've been inspired by in the past. I'm going to be honest, I really just included this topic as a chance to do like a quick Critical Role Legends of Vox Machina check-in. Has everybody been watching it? What do people think of the latest episodes? But Dael still hasn't seen it. I don't think Logan's seen all of it.
I'm waiting. I want to watch it all. I want to marathon it. I don't want to have to stop ever. I want to sit down and not stand up again until I'm done.
That's fair. I guess, James, you and I will just have to be like, how cool was that moment when the thing happened with the monsters and they did the thing and then there was torches? We need to do like Critical Role spoilers out of context, or Legends of Vox Machina spoilers out of context.
Yeah,
I'm going to say blowing out a candle.
Okay.
I'm going to say...
throwing up and throwing up.
Yes, yeah.
Keyleth going feral.
Keyleth going feral. A door painted on a wall. A painting of a door on a wall.
Okay.
What? Okay, I'm going to say, Doctor Who. Like, there's got to be like an image of like Doctor Who, like the Tenant Doctor Who, like chained to a wall or something. There's got to be. There's got to be something in there.
This is wild, because I thought that I would be able to understand. I know the story. I know it, and yet I'm just like, okay.
Just a screenshot from Attack on Titan.
Yes.
That's a good one.
Yes, that's a good one. Well done. I was excited when I saw those because I remember
What's
that
happening
was.
in this show?
Well, I'm surprised you can't figure that one out because I
we're at the end
remember.
of that.
Hi.
Yeah, no, I remember those from the
From
live
the
stream.
stream,
I don't know enough about Attack on Titan, probably.
The episode that I jumped on the live stream, the first episode of Critical Role I ever watched all the way through, was the episode where they were fighting those things in Whitestone. So I was really excited.
The Whitestone Big Boys.
I got too excited about the Whitestone Big Boys.
Oh, is that what they call? I didn't even know they had a name. But
No, they're not called that.
well, we're starting it. Hashtag Whitestone Big Boys.
It's a new Whitestone sports team. The Whitestone Giants.
Yeah.
The Whitestone Big Boys.
Yeah.
No, it's good. I'm enjoying it immensely. Let me just put it that way. It's very cool. The art style or the art direction is very cool. The monster design is very cool. I'm sorry, Dael. I guess that's all I can say. Keep watching it, folks.
Say anything you want. Say it all.
Because
Say it
it's
all.
cool.
It's fine.
It's cool. It's good. But other TV shows that have inspired us, we sort of touched on this at the top of the episode. I've definitely been inspired watching, because D&D is a game where, or any tabletop role-playing game is a game where you put what you like into the game, and if your friends haven't seen that thing, then you look like a genius, and if they have seen that thing, then you can geek out together. I think that was actually something you said, James, at one point. I've talked... Sorry?
It might have been.
It might have been.
knows?
I don't remember
Very
these
quotable.
things.
I say the words and then they're not mine anymore. They've gone
they're
out
wiped
into the
from the
world.
slate.
Yeah, they've
fair.
graduated.
No, I guess just like an example is I used the King's Landing attack before, but earlier in Game of Thrones, there's this scene where Drogon attacks like a
Is Drogon a dragon?
Drogon's a dragon.
Okay,
Drogon's
great.
the big
Thank
black
you so
dragon.
much.
Yeah.
See, the hilarious thing about Drogon, he's named after a guy named Drogo, but his name is Drogon and he's a dragon. So, like...
Drogon the dragon named after Drogo.
I love you, George Martin. You're a genius.
Drogo's namesake Drogon, who is a dragon, with his two brother dragons,
It's
who
a
are not
sort of
Drogon.
thing we make fun of, but, like, we love it still,
All Drogons are dragons, but not all dragons are Drogons. It's great. There's a scene where he attacks like a supply carriage train. The words are failing me, but it's from like season 6, I think, or season 7.
Trains in Game of Thrones.
And it's like a carriage train, like a supply train,
like a caravan, like
caravan.
a train.
That's
like
maybe the word I'm looking for. Yeah, a train.
Convoy.
Caravan. Convoy.
Oh,
that's the
convoy,
word I'm
convoy,
looking for.
convoy.
Yeah,
All
it's a
right.
convoy. He attacks a convoy.
Western song.
And it's just amazing, like talking about the cinematography, whether you think the plot's a bit silly because they start, hopping all around the map and distance becomes meaningless in the last few seasons. Just watching cinematically a dragon attack a supply convoy and just burn dudes to ashes in seconds, and just the fear on everybody's face when they hear the dragons kind of like low growl. The sound effects for the dragons, their growls and roars and things are just incredible. And the point that I'm coming to is, after seeing that, I was like, that's how I want to describe dragons in D&D. That's how I want to represent dragons in D&D. When I'm doing the Horde of the Dragon Queen attack on, I can't remember the name of the village because I changed it when I did it. I called it something
Bensburg.
else. Bensburg, yeah. I want it to be, horrific. Like I want them to feel the gravity of this dragon attack as this village burns down. I don't want it to feel like it's run of the mill, like it's mundane, like it happens every day. And so I guess just kind of like opening the conversation a little bit. What are some shows that have inspired you, either thematically, literally, you've just stolen wholemeal from, things that you've, even if it's just the sound or the music from a show and you've just been like, that's really affected, the way that I wanted to run this specific campaign. I know Castlevania, and in fact, Legends of Vox Machina have changed the way that I want to represent like undead and describe undead in the way that I run my D&D
The Wraith
games.
fight in episode 4 of Legend of Vox
The
Machina.
Wraith fight in episode 4 was incredible. That was so good. I didn't want to say it, Joey, but it was so good. So good. So creepy.
Yeah, that's. I think that's a game changer for undead for me. Also, like,
yeah, like like in my head, translating it into D&D, because I don't think you can help but watch that show and kind of like loosely translate it into D&D in your head and be like, that's turn undead is what they're using there. That's a fireball. That's a this. That's a that. So I was thinking they were shadows, and shadows are a monster that I've wanted to describe like really horrifically in the past, but I always feel like their description falls a bit flat because you're just like, they're like shadowy blackness,
I feel that's extremely true for just general undead, especially the first time that a character sees undead. It should be like life-changing.
Yeah, I agree.
I think there's sort of a
horrifically
Skyrim-ification of undead that a DM can easily fall prey to, where they're just like, oh, they're weak little guys. And it's like, that's a walking skeleton. Are you kidding me?
That's a dead guy, and he's up. He's going.
He's going.
I'm from a small town. I could have known him before.
Yeah.
Like, I know people in town, like that's my aunt's accountant or something, and now he's like bashing in my door. It's like, what?
Sure. Yeah, totally. I agree. I in fact have gotten into a habit of avoiding using undead, or in fact any type of monster that I want to feel, particularly unique or horrifying or wondrous, whatever it is. Because the more you use it at early levels, and the more the party begin to out-level that particular creature, whether it's a zombie or whether it's even like, like an aberrant, like a roper or something like that. Maybe a roper is not a great example, but something that is meant to really horrify or, put the party in a place of like, wow, we have never seen one of these before. If you're featuring them too early in your campaign, then they become run-of-the-mill very easily.
Yeah.
I'm struggling to think of a specific answer to your question, which is insane because I do this all the time. I constantly take specific visuals or, sort of cues, cinematic cues from specific movies.
Sure, yeah.
I'll rip them out and put them in my game all the time. I'm sure I've brought it up in like every second video, but I can't think of like specific ones right now. I suppose we're talking about undead. I've brought up Kingdom before, the Korean series, 2 seasons deep, and plus a movie, and there's another season coming, they say. Anyway, there's some great visuals for undead in that I would love to steal the next time I put undead into a game. Like they have this real specific sort of theme throughout the series of the undead and their relationship to temperature, right? Because originally they think that they only come out at night, but spoiler alert, as you go through the series, they learn that it's actually about them avoiding the warmth of the day. But as the series goes on, summer turns into autumn, turns into winter, and so by the time you get to the end of season 2, it's fully winter, and the final sort of confrontation takes place on a frozen lake. And
now
so
we know what could have happened.
But you have this like this great, the cinematics are incredible, but there's this perfect moment where they're out on the frozen lake, and they've drawn all the zombies out there because they want to sort of submerge them in the frozen water. And so there's these flaming arrows that are shot out into a gazebo that's on an island in the middle of the lake. And so it's on fire, but everything's frozen around them. And then there's just darkness, and the zombies run out of the darkness onto the frozen lake. One of them is the queen. She's got this like crimson robe on. It's very, I'm getting tingles thinking about it. Brilliant cinematics.
I should look at that, because I was thinking that, like, as you're saying that, it reminds me of, again, Season 8 of Game of Thrones, the attack on Winterfell. A lot of people have been very critical about, like, the specifics.
My brother, who actually watched Game of Thrones when we watched Kingdom, was like, why didn't they just do this?
Yeah, like, logically, you can definitely start to pull it apart. But, like, there's an undead dragon fighting against another dragon. Only one of those dragons is a Drogon. It's amazing. Like, just that's
pretty cool.
Jon Snow standing up and just like screaming at a zombie dragon, screaming back at him. Like, whatever you think of the scene logically, if you're like, what's he doing? That's so dumb, blah, blah, blah. Cinematically, it just looks incredible.
One piece of imagery from media that I think of a lot, and it's not live action, but it's the sort of live action-esque Blizzard cinematic style, is I think about the cinematic trailer for... Bard? No, for World of Warcraft Legion, a lot, because it's such a cool scene because it starts with the heroes in an airship, those classic Warcraft big flying boat airships, and over the course of the scene, it transitions into a land and sea battle, and it's just the sort of like movement from one battlefield to another that's incredibly dynamic sort of fight. That and that's a feel that I love to try and capture in my games is the players are doing their thing, but the landscape is always changing around them, and going from land to sea or going from air to sea to land is just such a great way of doing that.
Logan, if you're struggling, you seem to be struggling for an answer to this question, which is totally fine.
This is the only fantasy piece of content that I've consumed recently. And the last one I read was called Two Brothers, where a guy's head gets chopped off and then a rabbit goes and gets a flower to feed him to bring him back to life. But the lion that put his head back on put it on backwards, and he didn't realize for like 2 days. So it's not good reference material for any cinematic nitty gritty, but it is a ride.
I'd put that in my game though.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm loving it.
I don't mean to like say through my, the examples that I'm pulling that it needs to be some like, cinematic nitty gritty, like, master. It could just be, something silly or just something that you thought like that would make a cool monster or that would make a cool encounter.
I think a lot of the scenes and the way that they play out in a lot of Terry Pratchett's work is really inspiring. I feel like it would be really fun to run a Discworld kind of style game where everything feels a bit nonsensical and everything happens very fast and it feels disjointed, but it isn't. Just to have these grand things take the background and to have these mundane kind of character interactions take the foreground is always a lot of fun.
Yeah, for sure. I had a friend of mine who I'm not a Terry Pratchett fan, not from disliking it, just from not being exposed to it. But we were talking about his style of D&D and what he enjoys. And when he came out and he said, I just really love Terry Pratchett. I love Discworld. I've read all these books. This is what some of the stories are like. I'm like, that makes sense. That's exactly how you run your games of D&D. Is very Pratchett-esque. I've come to describing it as very whimsical. It seems. We have a listener question. We actually have a couple of listener questions. I apologize we haven't been getting around to them, but this week we will commence with getting around to them. This was a bit of a longer email coming in from Liam, and Liam expressing, listening to episode 10 of the podcast, James discussing the system limitations of 5e in terms of spell creation for players and systems that offer that capability. They just wanted to kind of recommend a system which, as I skim their email, is called Mage the Awakening by Onyx Path Publishing, and their Chronicle of Darkness setting. Do you know it, James?
I'm familiar with World of Darkness, but one of my great sort of RPG regrets is that I have never played a World of Darkness game. Many people who are big fans of Vampire the Masquerade, and a variety of the other ones, but Mage the Ascension is one I've not had the opportunity to play.
Sure. Liam's question is actually about the condition system in 5th edition, which is pretty simple. I know, it's a bit of a...
So, unrelated to the comment.
I just wanted to know if you were familiar. Basically asking if and how we would expand the condition system beyond how it presently functions, and what do you think that system could do for D&D or 5th edition? Discuss.
Okay. I have one that might be controversial. I would remove the stunned condition. I don't think it's fun for players to get stunned, and it's not fun for a DM for their big boss monster to get stunned. I don't think it's a very fun thing to do.
My point is related to that, is that there have been multiple times while I've been designing stuff that I've been like, what are the conditions? Like, what's the closest condition to the thing that I'm describing? And usually I want something like sickened, which doesn't exist, and poisoned isn't quite what I'm looking for, and stunned is the next best. And I was like, why do we have stunned? Let's replace that.
Yeah, I would rather have something like a I don't know, disoriented or something like that.
I would love that.
where
Confused,
Yeah, where it like still allows action but puts big penalties on it, because it's like
Suspended by disbelief.
the meat of D&D is uncertainty, right? That's why we have the dice in there. And I would rather just stack the deck against someone than say, nope, no playing the game.
Yeah. Yeah, and it feels like it kind of it flies in the face of the core of the game, right? Like, okay, here's a diversion. I'm a big watcher of Survivor. And on the last season,
why didn't you bring that up? It's a great fantasy series.
Yeah. And on the last season of Australian Survivor, they have longer seasons here because of various union things. So they have to come up with twists to try to stop people from being eliminated every week. I think they could just do that without twists, but you know what? It's not my show. But last season, for example, they did a twist where no one got a vote. Only one person got to vote that week. And you're like, but that's the core of the game. That's the only thing that you can be sure of in this entire show, is that you at least have one vote against someone else to eliminate them. And so that felt like it was bad for Survivor. It didn't match the game. It wasn't how that game should work. And I think a similar thing for D&D, anytime that a character is told you don't get to do things, that sucks, because that's the core of the game, is that at least you get to make choices.
It's bad enough when you just whiff an attack and you're like, oh, cool, well, I guess I'm not doing anything with my turn now. But to just be told flat out you don't get to do a thing, it's like... I think I had one other thing to do with conditions, and sorry, I'm talking a lot, but I have big opinions on this. If I had one other thing I could do, I would make it so that exhaustion were connected to being revived from dying.
Okay.
Summoner sickness, yeah.
Yeah. I think one of my big complaints about D&D is that there is a tension between the highly swingy D20. Matt Koval made a tweet about this the other day. That's why I'm thinking about it. It's a very sort of war-gamey, meat-grindy, swingy D20, and a very easy to revive sort of jack-in-the-box, zero. As long as I've got one hit point, I'm at full sort of situation. And I think one of the great ways you could do to leverage that system in either in a more, I don't know, hardcore direction, if you wanted to, would be to attach a penalty to being revived from zero. And I think the exhaustion system is a great way to do that.
I also like just reducing their maximum hit points.
That's true.
Survived.
But I would be fascinated to hear from any of you about how you would approach that while still mitigating it. To me, that seems like a logical step, but then I would worry that you'd end up with a very highly increased chance of death spirals, right?
Death spiral.
Just because of the mechanical implications of those choices. So, like, do you have ideas of how you would mitigate that?
By death spiral, do you mean just like players dying more and more often?
Yeah, well, just because if you come back...
get poorer.
Yeah, I mean, reducing max hit points probably wouldn't do it as much, but, like, you know, if you come back with exhaustion, the more that you get revived, the worse you are at fighting, you know, things like that. So it probably wouldn't be an instant, like, death spiral, but...
Yeah.
I think that the way exhaustion progresses, right, because I think it's, disadvantage on ability checks, and then it's...
speed.
I don't even it's speed. One. I don't even know what the next one is because exhaustion so rarely comes up in my games because it's such
and
a
when it does, it's only
condition.
the first thing that really affects what you do.
Yeah,
I add exhaustion to so many homebrew things, and the comments are always full of people saying that's too harsh. What happens if they get more exhaustion? And I'm like, from where? It never happens. It never happens. They will not get more levels of exhaustion.
Yeah. It's such a ruthless system that never comes up, and it
is spaced out really weird because, like, first it's disadvantage on just basic things you're trying to do, then your speed gets halved, which is a lot less consequential in most situations. Then you have disadvantage on the rest, attack rolls and saving throws, and then your hit point maximum is just cut in half, which affects people completely differently. Which is fitting.
If I were to tie it to death revival from being dying, I would move the disadvantage on attack rolls to being like the second to last thing before death. That's basically the only thing I would do, because otherwise,
yeah, that's fair. Adrenaline.
I think the death spiral is kind of the point, right? If you're playing a more sort of ruthless game, then you want people to really fear going down, and things like speed being cut in half is actually pretty scary in combat. But like the first time you go down, disadvantage on ability checks and stuff like that. Most people don't feel that, but it's enough of a like fear put into their heart that I think it's already a nice disincentive without totally gutting them.
I think that the way that I've changed exhaustion in the past is instead of it being disadvantage on your ability checks when you take on that first level, I find that as soon as somebody gets exhaustion, they disengage from the game. They go like, well, I don't want to roll because I've got disadvantage on everything, so
I'll just
I want
wait
somebody
this
else
out
to
till
roll.
it's fixed.
Exactly. What I have tried in the past, kind of tied to this, is instead of that disadvantage on ability checks, it's a D4 minus on everything. So saving throws, attack rolls, everything. And then in the exhaustion...
Like Bane or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. And then that becomes a D6 when in the exhaustion levels it would be disadvantage on like attacks or saving throws or whatever it is, and then it becomes a D8 just before they die. So it's this thing that's like a disadvantage, but it's not crippling. Like you could still roll high and just outroll. Like your bonus is probably going to be higher than 4 on most checks that you're going to want to make anyway. So
I quite like that.
Yeah, it's worked in the past. And then stacking that with, as you said, James, going down and then coming back with a level of exhaustion. I think I ended up negotiating with one group. You only come back with that level of exhaustion if you failed a death save, because they as a group felt that it was a bit too brutal, always coming back. But what they said was that it makes getting someone back up in combat more time sensitive, because you know you can't wait. Like you can't be like, oh, well, they've got a death save, so they're going to be fine. Like I can wait a turn or two.
Which I think comes back to our earlier point. It's a very good thing to make people feel time sensitive about death saves, because every turn you're making a death save, you're not playing D&D.
Yeah, exactly. And it makes death feel, like or at least going down in combat feel like a real risk, like that. The Wraith fight in Critical Role in Legends of Vox Machina, I'm going to always call it Critical Role, not Legends of Vox Machina. The Wraith fight in Vox Machina, when the party are getting messed up by the Wraiths, and you're like, man, that looks scary. We got to get them back into the fight. Like, we can't leave them there. Logan, were you going to say something before, sorry?
Not that I remember.
Cool.
Oh, yeah. Just with exhaustion, there's a system that I really like that I kind of sometimes integrate into 5e. City of Mist has a sort of system where every time you take a contextual negative, it's not explicitly advantage or disadvantage. Depending on the severity of like the disadvantage that you're given, it goes on a range from like -1 to -10 on your roll. And
reintroduce those floating modifiers.
Yeah, well, I feel like it's fine if you have one set of them. If you have them coming from multiple sources, then you get into homework.
Sure.
Yeah. The strongest memory for me that plays into conditions and how they function in 5e is, writing a bunch of stuff that are character features that are based on spell abilities, right? And going to look at those spells, things like Stinking Cloud or Confusion. Is that the name of the spell, or am I just stuck in Pokemon? Anyway.
No, I think Confusion, yeah.
And looking at those and expecting them to function using conditions. And they don't, that it's kind of this bizarre thing where conditions are an imperfect system that is trying to just give you a short list of stuff that expresses the non-numerical effects of, any number of things, trying to simplify something that is in our real world not simple at all. But it is interesting that there are even places in the core rules that just kind of go, I don't know, man, it's not in the conditions, but it kind of is a condition, but it's not. And it'll only exist in this one place, even if it's similar to a condition, it's not the condition, which is a bit bizarre. And then on top of that, you've got this kind of element, I don't know when conditions were first introduced to the game, but there's kind of almost a digital tabletop quality to conditions, because you have to remember that they're there. It's always like, here's this complicated element that is added on top of your character that we have to remember every single turn, and we have to remember every single turn that you need to roll to succeed against that thing. And it really just, I mean, maybe it's just since I've been playing 4E with a digital tabletop that I'm suddenly aware that that's something that the computer would remind you about. But at the table, we're all using those little rings from the tops of bottles. I've got pipe cleaners that I hang on people. I'm like, the red one means something about blood. I don't know. Yeah.
It's
green, you're poisoned.
In 3rd edition. Just
Third
so you know.
edition.
Yes.
Okay, see.
Cool. Well, thank you, Liam, for that email. If you want to get in touch with us, if you want to give us a topic to discuss, if you're curious, elaborate on something that we were discussing in the past, as Liam also did, get in touch through podcast@ghostfiregaming.com. I read them all. I flag them all. I have them sitting there to answer. So we will get around to them eventually. You can also, if you're listening to this on YouTube, comment down below. And sometimes I pull those instead of emails, or as well as emails, I should say. So continue the conversation. Our Twitter handles are our...
Every
social...
time he pulls a comment from the YouTube section,
just delete one.
He deletes an email.
Yeah. It's like, this one wins in combat. Who will win? Email or YouTube?
Thunderdome! Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Our social handles are just below our names if you want to go find us on Twitter or Instagram or wherever we happen to be with those handles. I know I'm probably more active on Instagram, but I know James and Dael and Logan, you guys are on Twitter quite a bit.
Twitter.
Live on Twitter. That's our new song. That should be our new theme
That's
song.
a jingle for Twitter. They better pay me.
Yeah, you got to trademark that now. Yeah. Maybe live on like something that rhymes with Twitter, because you can't trademark
That's
Twitter yet, but then you'll take it.
The only word that came to my mind that rhymes with Twitter was shitter.
Oh, she said it on this podcast.
I said it.
Rob, you're going to need to bleep it. You're going to need to bleep it, Rob.
I've gone rogue.
We don't want the explicit tag on our podcast. Anyway, I've been Ben Burr. This is with James Hake, Dael Kingsmill, Logan Reese, and we will see you all next week for the next episode of the Eldritch Lorecast, where Dael will control herself. No, I'm just kidding. See you all next week.